Keeping It Real with Tania and Nette. Hey, Tania, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Excited to be back here.
Me
And kind of
too.
weird sort of circumstances where we're going a bit off what we were planned to do. So I'm going to let you have a chat about um, our kind of couple of days ago we did a podcast and it didn't come out as what we expected.
Yeah, it was weird. And so I think working with spirit as a medium is a humbling experience. And I don't know about your experience, but they've always kind of kept me in check. And what we were trying to talk about, or what I was trying to talk about, was as a reader and as a medium, we don't have to heal every person that we come across, that we can have those boundaries, and or two, just choose not to, because maybe we don't have the energy or whatever. But it kind of started to go offside a bit. And the thing that was really interesting about it is, as we're doing the podcast, Nettie's Wi-Fi or electricity or whatever was like super off, and she's like this robot. It's going, like her body's not moving, but the voice was coming through. So as it was happening, I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe when it actually streams, it's going to come through a bit more clearly. But what happened after is, and I'm sharing this because I think it's important to share sort of the reality of being a medium and working with spirit on a regular basis, is they gave me shit. And they were like, look, there's a difference between a medium or a reader sort of expressing boundaries and sort of a refusal, and they didn't want the message to be misunderstood. So it was very clear that they didn't want the way in which that podcast ended up coming out to they didn't want that message to go out there.
Yeah.
So interestingly, and I hope that you'll share your experience too, is that I kept having a thought about something to say, and then it would disappear and it would be removed from my mind. And when I touched base with Nettie a couple days later, I was like, I'm sorry, friend. Like, I don't want to either of us to feel like we're wasting our time, but that podcast, I don't know, it's just not sitting right with me. I don't feel right with it. The spirit kind of gave me crap, because sometimes when I come on here, I'm venting a bit, and I'm not venting in what I consider a bad way, but it's just like, when I'm sharing my personal opinions. But they really reined me in, and they were like, no, you need to keep it focused, and you need to keep the message going in a certain way in which we want you to give it. And what people might not realize is that, and I think we talked about it before, is that when we're doing these podcasts, is we have spirit coming in and suggesting avenues or ways in which we should be expressing what we're talking about. But every time I tried to express sort of an opinion, the thought or the idea was just completely removed from my mind, and I wasn't actually given the opportunity to say it, because I would try to, but I couldn't find it, almost in the recesses of my mind. And so after we had a chat, and they just said, this is as much about us as it is about you, and this is why we've had this push for you to go ahead and do this. And there's a very specific message that they want to get out there, and they want to make sure that you and I are sharing the message in the way in which they want it to be coming out. So please share what your experience was, because, like, if I could just like take 2 more seconds, it was humbling. I was embarrassed. I was like, oh, like, I felt, not that spirit would ever try to shame somebody, but just me being on this podcast, being out there as vulnerable enough as it is, because, as a police officer, being a medium and an intuitive, it can kind of be looked at like I'm a bit crazy in the policing community, but then also in the spiritual community, people can be like, oh, I don't like government, or, and I'm authentically myself, but I find it very vulnerable and scary to be out there and share my message. So when Spirit kind of gave me crap, I kind of went down this little shame spiral of like, I suck. you know,
Yeah.
what right do I even have to be doing this? So on that note, tell me what your experience was.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's important for the listeners to remember too, and for both of us to remember how we got together. We got together through chance of spirit, really. We were directed to come together, hardly knew each other, started this podcast. And from the minute we started, we had electrical issues with our computers because the energy and the excitement that spirit had to share, the point we could have spoke for about 20 hours straight without a breath, because spirit was just bringing in these messages. And every podcast since then, we come on and we've actually both had to work to control that to some degree, because spirit's got a lot to say. And when someone's listening to it, it sounds like you're interrupting each other, but our spirit's already heard what the other person's going to say before they finish. And so it comes in on this great thing. And so when we started this podcast, it was like, okay, what are we're going to do this. And we talk for like a minute sort of beforehand, and then we start. And Tania starts with the podcast, blah, blah, blah. And then it's sort of over to me. And usually Spirit's sitting there ready, and it's paused, ready to add the bit. And there was nothing. It was like, and so much so that, like, I'm connected to Spirit constantly, which I'm sure a lot of people are. But I very rarely in my life have that silence. And it was so silent. It was like Spirit had just said, this isn't what we want to talk about. You girls are on your own track here. I'm out. And so I was like, and I was trying to find words to add to it. And I realized how much Spirit actually gives me a voice, and how in sync my language is when it comes out to be not only my own thoughts within my brain, but also the thoughts within my higher self. And it's so seamlessly put together. So when I had that silence, I was really like, okay. And we clunked through the thing. I had no idea I was glitchy, but I watched a tiny bit of it back, and it's unusable. So even if we didn't come to this conclusion, even if we weren't actually up there with Spirit, we wouldn't have been able to use it anyway. So they were making sure that we couldn't, but it was a huge lesson for both of us, I think. And for me, I probably had a little bit of a different reaction to you. I almost took it as a really wonderful confirmation of the importance of what we're doing here, that the message is actually coming from Spirit. And that it's directed by Spirit, and that it's something above sort of us. And also how lucky I am to have Spirit every single day in most of my thought. And I can feel back to that silence now. And I was like, wow, that would be horrible to have that where people are having conversations and you have to wait till the sentence is finished to be able to connect, to hear it. And then you got to think before you speak. And, like, if that makes sense, like, that's not how I live. And so I took it really as almost a kind of a blessing of, like, how lucky we are to have this wonderful gift and to be in a position to share it. And the fact that we come straight back to each other and say, both of us 100% were like, that's not being used, before we even know that the video wasn't usable, because I only looked at that up this morning, so I didn't even know that we couldn't use it, but we decided not to. So and then interestingly, I sat down and thought, I need to have some more thought about this. And I went for this lovely beach walk, and that's where I do most of my meditation is walking along the beach. And I came back and sat down, and I was just about to close my eyes, and Spirit came in and said, okay, next podcast, these are your questions. And I was like, what? And that's not how we work. I mean, we make a topic up sort of 10 minutes beforehand, and we might text each other an hour beforehand. What are we doing today? Do you want to do it on this? It's sort of fly by a pants. So Spirit's kind of saying, hey, hold on. There's a message that you need to deliver to listeners. And we are going to make sure you do it. So I don't know whether this will just be this one podcast, but I send them to Tania, and Tanya's like, yeah, this is what we're doing. This is the direction we're going. So yeah.
And then the other thing, and I think the where I kind of felt crappy about it is because sometimes I'm a really slow learner. They've kind of showed this to me before, and they've also said that I need to, I'm blunt, I'm straightforward, I'm, I kind of say what I think, and they really wanted to take me to a more heart-centered place and be more soft, is what they said. And I'm not very good at being soft. I'm extremely soft, but I don't always lead with my softness. So they were really asking me to bring that softness here, which is uncomfortable as fuck. But anywho, they also asked that I, because I think I've talked about it in different podcasts where I can just go on and off and on and off. And that's kind of what I was doing. But they're asking that we reflect about the topics and reflect and correlate with them on what it is that the message that they want. So they posed it towards us as questions so that it could guide sort of where we're going. But I think, Nettie, and we didn't talk about this before, but in the vein of keeping it real, if we get to that place where it's like, I've got nothing, let's just say that and
Yeah.
and say, okay, that must mean Spirit's ready to move on. Because I think what they're saying to me right now is that not only have I learned a language with Spirit, but I have to learn that language with myself at a different level. And it's a language that you and I are learning with each other.
Yeah.
So, and it's a beautiful thing. And I'm considering the space in which I kind of went to where I was like, I suck. That's not, I just want to be clear that that's not where Spirit's coming from. Spirit was not trying to shame me. They weren't trying to, make me feel poorly. They were just trying to get the point across of that's me as a human being that kind of takes it into that space. But yeah, I think it's fascinating. So they posed things to you in the form of a question. So are you ready for questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say the first question is quite interesting because in the podcast, the word past lives came up. And as soon as past life came up, my spirit would activate again and just want to talk about past lives. That wasn't what we were talking about. And we were getting skewered off to it. We'd go back onto the topic and we'd go back onto past lives. So I found it quite interesting that the first question is on past lives. So
and who knows how many questions, like honestly, I could probably fill the rest of the podcast with past life. So,
yeah.
maybe this is the next 4 podcasts. Let's see.
Yeah. Okay. So question 1 that Spirit was asking was, what benefits are there to looking into the past, both in this life, in your current life, and in past lives?
Go ahead.
Okay. It was interesting because one thing that Spirit did say on last podcast, which I really I keep hearing during the week, and it's come up in the last few days, and it's come up in conversation, so it needs to be said. So Spirit was telling me, and the way I see it is that past lives come up so that we can learn from past lives, not so that we can live in past lives. And I really liked that. Like, it was like that made sense for me, and I could see with different cases that I've had that's there. But it's so that you can release energy around what that is. You can acknowledge what the scene. So if I see a past life, I will ask, why was this scene brought to me now for this person in this present time? And usually there's something that correlates, like a matching picture to this in their life. And it's not to say they want them to go back or to blame that life. They just want to show them that there's a pattern happening, or get dive into an emotion that matched in that, so you don't misunderstand what's happening in this one. It's like, oh, okay, I get the point, because that's the same as what it was there in the background. So the past life is really just a tool that they use, the way I see it. It's not somewhere that you need to go and dwell on, or you don't even need to try and heal yourself or rehash that. Like, one of the things Spirit's saying to me now, that too many people go back and they rehash and they rehash and they rehash the past. It's not. You need to acknowledge the past. You need to acknowledge that that happened. You need to acknowledge that something is happening in your life that is similar to that. And that's what it's there for, as far as I can see. And, you know, asking when you see something or have something in the past that triggers in your mind, ask, what is the purpose of this coming into my life at this present time? And then deal with something in the present. So it may actually help you deal with the situation that you're in now, that won't keep happening as a repeat pattern in the rest of your life. That's the way I see it.
So that's interesting. I did a reading a couple of weeks ago with this gal who's a practicing medium, sitting medium, and she said, "What are your thoughts on past lives?" Because she also does a lot of energy work. And I said, and this is my true answer, is that I agree with you. They will, if they are bringing past life to you, it's to show you that you're in a pattern, or they're calling it, interestingly, they're calling it an energetic carousel. So what I interpret that to be is that you're in an energy that just keeps spinning and you're doing the same thing over and over and over. Because you know how a carousel, like with the horses, and
Yeah.
it just goes around and around and around. So agreed, the past life is just like a hint or a tool to go, okay, so this happened in your past life and that's why you're reacting to this in this life. But this gal, she was like, what are your thoughts on past lives? Like, do you think they're legit? I'm like, past lives 100% exist. However, whether I was aware of my past life or not, I'm still going to have a situation in front of me in this life that I have to deal with, that I have to process, and I have to move through. So you can maybe have the awareness that this is a pattern or something that's happened previously in your life, but from my perspective, that doesn't make a difference. So that's why I like how you said it's a tool. So it's a tool to point out to you that what you're being presented with in this life is something that needs to be moved through. And I think it's really interesting, because I think that's all that we really need to do is we need to deal with what's right in front of us, and we need to move through that. And I also don't think that we always need to go into the past. Like right now, my father's quite ill, so I've been sort of processing some childhood stuff, and not really processing, but just recognizing how my childhood has affected my current life. But I think that we can over process that sometimes, where we go back and we need to go into all these different ways of healing the father wound, or healing shame, or healing guilt, or healing these other parts of ourselves, when I just need to look to the past for a hint in my current life, for a hint to why I might be a certain way in this present time. And I think that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think it comes back to what I opened with, and Spirit's throwing them ahead. I'm literally sweating today, which is really interesting, because the stronger Spirit's there, my palms sweat and I sweat all over.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying, what you and Tania are both trying to say is that Spirit doesn't want you to live in the past. They want you to learn from the past. And I think if there's one thing you take away from what we're trying to say, is that's it. Don't live in the past. Learn from the past. And we are going to do another podcast on this, because there is so much more I could say, and I can feel that Spirit wants to actually explore this a lot more.
Well, then why don't you, Nettie? Because we've got about like 10 minutes.
Yeah, no. It's
into it.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like I'm sort of getting the vibe that it needs to be something that needs some thought and to be said sort of as a holistic thing, because there's a lot of stories and a lot to unpack in different ways that past lives come into our thing, and different ways that we can help each other energetically with acknowledging them and learning from them. So are you happy if
Can
I
I
move on to number 2, or you want to
no, can
finish
I
with
can
something?
I just say Spirit saying that it's not necessary to dive into past lives in order to heal your current circumstance. Your current circumstance needs to be dealt with in the here and now. If you want to go back for a hint, they're happy, they're saying they're happy to oblige, but not necessary.
It's a tool. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a
Yeah.
tool where it needs to be. Yeah. Okay, number 2. When everything seems too much in life, what spiritual tactics do we use to help calm everything down?
I don't know if I would even call it a spiritual tactic. Like, I connect to spirit, I ground, I go near water. I need to be in water, on water, by water. Definitely. I don't, and maybe it's because I'm fiery that water just like calms me and grounds me. But there is something absolutely exceptional about swimming in the ocean for me. I I feel like I'm absorbing and I'm absorbing energy. I feel like I'm absorbing minerals. Like, it's just, and then I'm weightless. Like, it's just phenomenal. But you know what I do is I kind of dig in, like, just in this past week, I did some kitchen renovation. So I painted my kitchen and I changed a bunch of my lights. But that's what I do because it's very meditative for me so that I can actually slow down, focus on nothing but what I'm doing, and then I can connect really well to spirit. Like, I have ADHD, so I am very busy in my head. I'm hyperactive. I'm not very good at sitting still. That's why meditation doesn't work for me. So that's what I do personally is I'll clean my house because I need to be physically busy in order to quiet my mind.
Yeah,
What about you?
I think we're almost identical. Water, water, water. So if I'm at home, I will have a shower. I will go. I live on the beach, so I'll go to the beach. I will go for a
Me
swim.
too.
Like, yeah, anything that it can get me into water, but also things that get my body going. So I'll vacuum the house. Like,
Yes.
yeah, it's like it's kind of good when everything gets too much because my house gets really clean.
So does
Um,
mine.
yeah, but I'll cook a really nice meal, like something really healthy. I'll get busy in my physical senses. So taste, smell, all those sort of things that human. So it's almost like it's not that you go away from your spirituality, it's just you calm and you meet the needs of your 3D body.
Yes.
Yeah, and for us who have a lot going on in our head, doing those things that are task orientated give us a chance to stop being in our head, and sort of focus, but it almost splits the everyday in our head out of there, and then it's just the task and spirit, and that's it. They're the things that are left.
Yes.
It's like, but I have this song that, when it all gets too much, I do find that if my husband comes up and he's trying to, so if you're doing this for someone else, find out what their need is when everything seems too much. I've asked my husband, I don't want you to answer anything. I don't even really need you to listen. I don't want to talk. I just need you to be there. And that might be just to sit and hold hands with me, or go for a walk and hold hands with me. Or there's a song called Chasing Cars by Snow Patrol, and I'm not musical, right? 000. So very rarely do I mention a song, but it says, there's a line in it, and it says, if I lay here, if I just lay here, would you lie with me and just forget the world? And that sums up when everything really is too much, and even water and everything else doesn't work. That's what I just want. I just want someone to lay with me and let's just lay together, forget the world.
And hold you. That's
Yeah,
a huge thing for me too, is physical touch and the calming energy of somebody else, Kevin
yeah,
specifically.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we're not asking for answers. We're just asking for someone to be there.
Yeah.
And you know, so that's kind of me. Oh, I'm going to put a photo up on Facebook for those who are on our Facebook page, One Foot in Both Worlds. I get to the point sometimes where it's overwhelming and I can't be in my house, I can't be anywhere, it's not suitable to be at the beach. So I've got this photo of me with a bucket of water sitting around a campfire at my husband was trying to, you know, make me feel okay. I'd done a lot of energy work, I was tired, everything was a bit much, and I sitting there with a towel, a bucket of water, my feet in it, smiling away, drinking a beer, going, this is life. And he said, it's so funny how water for you just calms everything down. So
Me
yeah,
too.
I'll
Me
put it up.
too.
It's an embarrassing photo, but I'm going to put it up anyway. So
I love it. The thing that I don't do, and Spirit's sort of redirecting me, when just the other day I was going for a walk with a friend of mine, and recently, Nettie, I don't know if you've noticed, but collectively the energy is overwhelming. I feel like there's like an energetic shift that's happening that has, for sensitive people, us feeling kind of anxious and overwhelmed. And that's certainly how I felt. And I've talked to a number of different people who have actually sort of felt that same way, where they're kind of, they're like, I don't really have good reason to feel this way, but this is how I feel. And I was walking with my friend the other day, every day at work, we go for a walk at lunch. Renee, you met Renee.
oh, yeah.
And I said, you know, I really feel like something that I'm supposed to do in this situation, because as soon as I'm like, oh my God, I'm anxious, I'm like, okay, I don't want to go there. I want to make sure that I take care of myself. So I start eating right, exactly what you said. I do all these different things that always kind of feed my soul and make me feel good. But I said, sometimes I feel like what we need to do in these situations is we need to be okay with being uncomfortable. And we need
Yeah.
to, instead of when that overwhelming feeling comes, when that anxiety comes, instead of trying to do everything to get away from it, which is essentially what we're doing, we're trying to get into water, we're trying to ground, we're trying to make that feeling go away. Sometimes we need to just embrace it and just let it be there. Let that feeling of overwhelm sit in our body, let that feeling of anxiety sit in our bodies, and just get comfortable with it and be okay with it. Because I think, you know, collectively, when there is this energetic shift that's happening, which I haven't tuned significantly into, I can just feel it. That's what it's there for, is because it just needs to process through us.
Yeah.
And the word acceptance, I was sitting here and I wrote down the word acceptance, but just accepting that it's also okay to feel that way instead of trying to get out of it. So there's a fine line between trying to get out of it and just being okay with being overwhelmed and anxious and feeling like, you know, you want to go jump off a cliff.
Yeah. And knowing that it will pass, you know,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, just, but give it the time that it needs. And, you know, yeah.
But I also on a spiritual level, and I double check to make sure I'm okay to share a slight little bitch. Thank you, Spirit. That sometimes spiritual teachings and spiritual people will kind of want you to spread this acceptance sauce onto absolutely everything. Like, oh, you'll be fine if you just accept your circumstances. You'll feel better if you just accept this situation that's happening. You'll feel better, just acceptance, just like mayo on a sandwich, just accept everything. And I don't agree with that, because I believe that you're kind of forcing yourself to be okay with something that you're not okay with. So that's not what I'm saying when I say just let it happen. I'm not saying you accept it. I'm not saying you like it. I'm just saying let that feeling be there.
And I think
Not
that's what,
spreading acceptance sauce all over
yeah,
something.
no, I think that's what I like about that song, Chasing Cars, because that to me just lay with me. Like, I don't want answers, I don't want you to make me feel better. I need to let this go through my body, but I need you just to sit there while this happens. And so
Yes.
for me, I think when that song came into my life was a little bit of when I was just realizing that this is something my body's had to go through, but just be with me while it goes through. And Yeah. And
Exactly.
so I do hear, and I do strongly know that you're not saying, it's okay to be like, you're not, deal with this shit as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I think there's been times in my life where, I'm going through something and the advice that I'll receive from people is, oh, you just need to accept that this is the reality of life. And to me, acceptance is a process.
Yeah.
Acceptance isn't something that I'm just like, okay, super, yeah, fully in acceptance of this. Like it just doesn't work like that. And I think it's very ingenuous. It's very inauthentic to try to force yourself to be okay with something that you're not okay with.
Yeah, and I think it's the stuff that's coming up in my head now is what you said earlier really relates to people in times of grief and things like that as well. Giving
Hmm.
your body time and your soul time to adjust to things. That being okay, not being okay, is really important in the grief process. And so there are times where you need to deal with it and try and get yourself out of it, and there's times where you just need to be with it. I think that's what Spirit's trying to sort of demonstrate. All
I
right, we up
agree
to
with you.
question 3?
We are at 30 minutes. Can you believe it?
Oh, wow. Do we want to do another question?
Sure, go for it.
All right.
Absolutely.
Do you personally get value out of messages that you do for other people's readings? Or are you just delivering the message and then you forget about it? It's got nothing to do with you. Are you just a middleman?
Both. Both. Sometimes spirit will come through and I'll be like, and I should be taking this advice as well. Thank you very much. Because it can be very relatable. And then other times I can't necessarily relate. So it depends. But I would say 95% of the time it's something that is valuable to me as well. You?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because Nancy Rebecca, the teacher that I had, she always believes that the message comes to a psychic, to that person with a matching picture, and depending on what the degree is it, but it wouldn't come through you if it didn't have a message. And sometimes we don't even realize that till years later or years down the track. And I am finding that as well, like that's her words. But I do find that often, in fact, I got a message for Nancy Rebecca, which was a bit weird because like Spirit coming in, she's actually an amazing, very well-known psychic medium, healer. And I was like, why are you telling me? She's going to know all this. Like I'm not going to give her the message. And it was about 3 days of not giving her the message. And then eventually I was like, okay, I'll give her the message. And they told me how to give her the message. It was a way. So I did that. And the person who received the message that actually works with her was, I agree totally with these messages. This is the messages that I'm getting for her. But the next day, one of the message came up, and it was about things getting lost in content, which was just as we were having this kind of message that people were hearing the wrong message by the words we were saying. And so I was kind of, oh, that first message was actually for me. And the next day, the second message, there was 3 messages that I had for Nancy. The second message was exactly what I needed to hear. And then the third message was exactly what I needed to hear. I needed to reach out to someone, which it was telling her to do. And it was actually reaching out to the same person or the same people. So it was quite interesting because I was like, oh, those messages were directly for me as well. And that's why Spirit came through me to give them to Nancy, because I needed to hear them over 3 days as well. So, and I could relate to them, and I thought about them for her before I delivered them. So when they came onto my sort of tray, it was like, oh, I've already thought about this. I know how this relates. I know how I can learn from this and change from this. So yeah, I don't think they're always, there. I did a reading for someone. I had a friend who lost something, and one of the things that I can do psychically fairly well is find lost items. And it was that the item that they'd lost was from a loved one that was passed, was alive but was dying, and it was something they were going to pass down. And the message that I got, which was a full beautiful scene, was about what happens when someone dies and about valuing things. And anyway, my father passed away like 4 months later, and I remembered clearly, and I saw my own father in the vision, and I remembered exactly what it was there. And so at the time, that didn't mean anything to me. We just found the item, and it was great. But 4 months later, I was like, that's why I was asked to find those
Yeah.
items. Yeah, it's cool.
The other thing that happens for me is I will get people coming for readings that are coming to me where the solution is very similar to something that I've personally gone through. I definitely get that with medical stuff as well. And I mean, I hope and pray that I'm not going to have to keep going through medical things or different things in order to give the messages. But just to end this off, because we're just about over time, as a medium, I don't have a boss. My boss is spirit, and spirit doesn't let me get away with things. And through the process of being a medium, I remember getting a reading years ago, and my aunt came through and she was like, "Are you sure that you want to continue to pursue this? Because it brings on a great sensitivity, but we're also forced to go through things and grow from them." Have you experienced that? Like, I haven't had a free ride. If I were to sit down and outline to somebody everything that I've been through in the 40 plus years of my life, it would be jaw dropping
Yeah.
to a lot of people. And I believe that's the life of a medium. And other mediums that I know will give a resounding yes. We don't get spared. We get to go through everything. And I think too, because then we can bring empathy and we can bring compassion and we can bring experience and all of those things to readings.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting point, because I had a friend that didn't know of my intuitive abilities. My husband and her husband are really good friends, and we didn't know each other very well. And she said to me, "Oh, you can't be an intuitive medium." And I'm like, "Okay." I said, "Why not?" She said, "Because you had too good a childhood." And I was
It's
like,
very common for
"Whoa."
mediums, people with intuitive abilities, to have hard lives. Very,
Yeah.
very common.
And I was telling a girlfriend, and I was really annoyed about it, because then I was second guessing myself. I'm like, well, maybe I'm not meant to be. Maybe I am. And Spirit said to me, "You were born a spirit of the light. Your purpose is to not to have come in with a beautiful childhood. But for you to think that you have not had trauma in your life,
Yeah.
it's just that with Spirit, you are very good at dealing with it. And so you are an example that when the shit hits the fan, you don't have to fall hard if you stay in line with Spirit. It doesn't mean some people are. It doesn't mean that because you do fall doesn't mean you're in line with Spirit. That was your purpose. But, I had a miscarriage. I don't even think about that anymore. I nearly drowned twice. I had my husband really sick to the point that they didn't think he would come back again. My son was born, and I nearly died when he was born. Like, when I start going through
Those
the
are
things,
serious traumas.
yeah,
Yes.
but I don't, my friends and my family and everyone around me doesn't see me as having a traumatic life, and I don't see myself as having a traumatic life, because I dealt with them very well with Spirit, and Spirit came in, and I surrendered to Spirit during those times, and I was able to cope in such a really good way. So I don't carry the energy of the trauma. I'm not trying to go back into that trauma. I dealt with the trauma then and there at the time, and I learned from it. And so it's interesting, because then I sort of went to her and said, "Oh, next time we caught up, I did have a traumatic life." I started listing off.
Just so you know, I am going to list it all out for you. How dare you? But I think that's key, because when you're connected to spirit, you're connected to yourself, which means that you're processing what's happening for you in the moment. And I can say for me, and we're definitely going over time, is that I had to learn how to process things.
Yeah.
And that was with spirit. So now I process things in the moment. I process them as they're happening, but I didn't always used to. So I think that is the key, for you for why it hasn't had lasting effects? Because I think I've said it before, the point of emotions is to feel them and let it process through your body. That's it. That's all we're
Yeah.
supposed to do.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it can become so uncomfortable that we avoid it.
Yeah. And my childhood accepting that, you know, you can deal things with the moment, and having that love and all that thing to do it probably meant I was capable of dealing with that, you know,
Yeah.
at a young age with guidance, sort of thing. So yeah,
Mhm.
so we're going to leave the questions. I think we should really do finish spirits questions next week in our Q&A. I think that there's definitely, it's interesting because the next question I didn't have an answer for. So the fact that we've run out of time, I think, means that I'm going to have a very interesting week, because
Lots of chats.
yeah, because
But
I'm going to read the question to you, because, and it's what we're going to answer next week. So, and it'll be interesting to know if I come up with something in that week through spirit. But it's, what's the silliest thing a spirit or guide has ever said or done for you?
interesting.
Yeah, so
Interesting.
we'll answer that one next week. But I was trying to think of something silly. Silly is not a word that I use, so it was a weird question to come across. But anyway,
Yeah.
we'll answer that first time coming back.
Great.
Very good.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you for listening. It was lovely chatting with you again, Nettie, and we will see you all next week.
See you later. Bye.